James, let's talk about media. Obviously, in our old world, these kind of things, SD cards, compact flash cards, where we stored our media, our rushes. They're pretty reliable. You can sort of stick them in your pocket, you can throw them around. Talk to me about this camera. I know it shoots on SSD drives. Talk to me about your experience with them.
Well, media and sort of media management and data management is something that's quite close to my heart, because I'm quite meticulous in, probably coming from a post background, in how I treat the media and how I look after things. And I think it's even more important because this camera is recording onto consumer grade SSDs. And what's great about that is that it makes it much more affordable. I mean, these are off the shelf SSDs.
Yeah.
Now, if it was proprietary SSD media, it would become a lot more expensive. BlackMagic recommend that you obviously buy good grade SSDs, and they spec the right SSDs on their website to buy. Don't be misled by the figures that manufacturers quote when it comes to read-write speeds, because a lot of the times those figures won't give you consistent read-write speeds.
And certainly not for large blocks of video files, which might be, is it 4 gigabytes, no, 7 gigabytes a minute in RAW?
Yes, that's the point. Let's not forget this camera is recording RAW.
And if you compare that to Red, with its 7:1 compression, that's equivalent to about 4 gigabytes per minute, and that's 5K. So we're talking about a lot of data here, and so you've got to have media that can handle that amount, that volume of data, that flood of data coming through at high speed.
Definitely. When you consider, the strand of recording with this camera in RAW, if you're using a, say, 240, 256 gig drive at about 25p frame rate, you're going to be getting roughly half an hour of record time in RAW. Now, if you switch to a compressed format, ProRes or DNx HD, then you'll get a lot longer. You'll get more like 120 minutes or so of record time.
So almost double.
Exactly. So, or more than double in some cases. So you have options still, but you have to be able to allow for that increase in data size and capacity when you're recording with RAW, and that falls all the way down the line for then backing up, archiving, editing, working with your media in post-production as well.
The other thing that's probably worth bearing in mind here is that, okay, SD cards are kind of consumer grade, but companies like SanDisk and Lexar have made professional grade high-speed SD cards that are robust. No one's making dedicated SSDs, are they? So it is you're buying drives that are designed to be put in computers and never taken out. So I guess one of the things to be aware of is every time you remove the SSD, if you don't protect the drive properly by putting it in a proper case, I know BlackMagic have got little cases that look like DV cam tapes. I notice you've got a solution here, is that it was never designed to be put in and out of contact multiple times. So that's something to be bearing in mind as well, isn't it? You've got an interesting setup here. You seem to have anti-static bags. Talk to me about them.
These are hard drives at the end of the day. That's the point. They're off-the-shelf hard drives. In comparison to Red's proprietary Red mags, they're built, they're a lot more expensive, and that's what you're paying for. You're paying for much more expensive Red mags, the durability and the
speed.
Speed and the construction. So, it doesn't mean that you can't shoot, you can't use this media. You just have to take more care and precaution with it. You have to treat it more like you would if you're treating film stock. So one way to protect it against electromagnetic interference is to use anti-static bags, and it's not something I'm religious about all the time, but I keep them here just because I think it is a good principle. And then I have a dedicated pouch. I make sure that my media always goes in something and it's protected from dust, debris, the normal things that happen when you're on a set. You need to have your own system so that you treat the media with care, and you just remember at the end of the day, if you don't, then you're going to lose footage.
And I've had a problem with an SSD. I was using it on. I've got this slider. It's Camera Motion Research Blackbird, and it's got a little stand. And I was using it on that stand, and I was testing it, and it slipped, and it just fell over like that onto a rug with the SSD inside it. Now the camera was absolutely fine. It only fell about the distance from my hand down to the ground like that. But it stopped. The SSD stopped working. It completely just, I don't know what happened. Maybe there was a dry solder somewhere inside it. But you know, it just was one of these things where the media stopped working, and I couldn't get the disc to load and mount. And so you do have to be very careful. These are not durable, robust, specific media designed for filmmakers. It's certainly very affordable, but you have to have this extra consideration for just looking after your media. And I must admit, I'm guilty of just throwing the media in a bag. And I think, having listened to you now, I'm going to take a bit more care. And BlackMagic do actually have these cases for SSDs. And at first I thought, oh, that must just be kind of a bit of a fancy sort of ode to tape, you know, a little nod to tape. But actually I can see now it's very practical, because it's going to stop anti-static and other things.
Completely. But, you know, ultimately, I think the decision to use SSDs in the camera is a fantastic decision by BlackMagic, because it makes the camera, again, I mean, there's no point in releasing a camera at this price point with its own proprietary media, which, you know, if you compare it to, say, Red's media, you know, costs more than the camera in some instances. So you need to have good, reliable, fast media which is accessible for the price point that you're launching the camera, and SSD really is the only way to go, especially when you consider you're recording raw onto it.
So we've talked about some of the kind of the pitfalls of SSDs, because, you know, it's important not to just pretend this is all plain sailing. But let's talk about some of the benefits as well. Super fast, and we've both got these little devices. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is you've shot your media and then you want to offload it quickly. So what's great is that you've got various different solutions on the market. This is an SSD reader which you just slot in and it goes straight to Thunderbolt. So in this way, although we've talked earlier that you can't come out through the Thunderbolt port on the camera and offload your footage that way, what you can do is just simply put your SSD into a caddy like this and then go Thunderbolt straight into a computer. And the transfer speeds from Thunderbolt are incredible. You know, they really, really are fast. So that's one quick way to get your footage off.
And this is from Seagate. It's actually part of a system called a Seagate GoFlex. And it's a great solution. It's the only solution, as far as I'm aware, to plug an external drive into and get Thunderbolt out. But what also comes with, it comes with docking cables that allow you to go to USB, FireWire 800, and the Thunderbolt adapter. So it's quite a versatile system. I think it's like £99 in the UK and $99 in the US. I got mine in B&H, I think. But I've seen them in the Apple Store for around about £100.
So another solution, and something I use a lot actually, is the GoFlex cables that you were talking about, Den. I actually use these straight onto the drive as well.
Right.
So here's USB 3 out from the attachment to the drive, which then I can plug straight into the laptop with a USB 3 port. And again, getting phenomenal speeds from USB 3. And another solution, if your computer doesn't have USB 3 on it, is that you've also got different options. You could go to FireWire 800 as well. So I keep all of these in the bag, because this one I'll use to go to desktop and the other one to a laptop. And
you get all these when you buy the kit? Or are these extras?
No, these are all things you'd buy.
Okay, so separately. But yeah, the fact is, you've then got, because we've both got Retina laptops, and if you wanted to archive, for example, for this project, we are archiving everything we shoot from the SSDs onto a GoFlex Seagate 1.5 terabyte drive, but we also need to read the cards into the same machine. So we can either use two of these, or we could use USB 3 off the drive into Thunderbolt onto the read-write drive. So it's just about maximizing your in-out throughput for the whole system.
And really the starting point when it comes to working with the media in the camera is to start with, you have to format it. And so the first thing you do, you don't even put the media into the camera, you start by placing the media onto a computer. Be it a Mac or a PC, it needs to be a computer which will read the Mac HTFS drives. So there's software on a PC which will allow you to read these drives, but ultimately you need to be able to read them as a Mac format and format them as a Mac format drive. And that's all you need to do.
And hopefully at some point there will be a firmware upgrade to the camera which will allow you to format your drives in camera, because it is a bit frustrating. I always feel very nervous about going into my disk utility and formatting a hard drive. No matter how careful you are, there's just that sinking feeling that if it's on your master hard drive, you're just a bit worried about it. So just be very considered when you go through this process of formatting your drives.
Well, I think one reason for BlackMagic doing this is to keep an open system, essentially. The file format that it reads is a Mac file format, and it's basically recording either QuickTime, ProRes, or .mtf files or .dng files onto the drive. So it's a very straightforward system that you're basically, all you're doing is recording file formats onto a Finder based drive.
I think it's worth mentioning here as well, you can record multiple file formats on the same SSD. So you can record Cinema DNG in RAW, you can record ProRes, and you can record DNX at the same time. So as in, you know, you can record some shots DNX, some shots. But one thing to bear in mind at this point in time, if you've recorded RAW and you then take the disc out and then for some reason you go and shoot on another disc and you record ProRes, when you put the RAW back in, if you're in ProRes mode, the RAW footage will not show up when you press play on the back of the screen. You have to be in RAW for it to play back RAW files, and in ProRes to play back ProRes files, and that freaked me out one time. Certainly that's as far as I'm concerned still happening today. Is that your experience?
Yeah, that's correct. There's a few ways which, when you start reviewing and looking at footage, you can see that certainly you need to be in the corresponding footage record format to play it back on the screen. And another interesting aside is that actually when you play back raw footage on the screen, you can actually change, this is where you can see the metadata come into effect. Even on playback, you can change the ISO and you can change the color balance of the clips and see them change on the back of the camera, therefore highlighting that this is just recorded as metadata. You have control even on the back of the camera.
So again, at this point in time, which is January 2013, you still have no media remain on the camera, so you have no way of knowing how long you've got left, and you cannot delete files from the camera. So you have to be quite disciplined about what you shoot. And Ryan Walters was on a blog post recently. I know Ryan from Revenge of the Great Camera Shooter, great guy, brilliant cinematographer. He wrote a wonderful article and he said he hopes that this will bring back a greater discipline in filmmaking, back to sort of 5:1 shooting ratios, where if you record crap, frankly, onto the card, you can't get rid of it until you ingest it. So it may just force you to be a little more considered before you press record, because you can't delete anything off the card while it's in the camera.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially if you're working in the field with the camera. There'll become a certain point where, unless you've got enough record media to record onto continually, where you'll need to have a laptop with you, because you'll either need to be able to get footage off or you'll need to be able to reformat so that you can actually continue to shoot.
So I think summary points for media is continually check the BlackMagic Design website for their recommended media. I have, I think, the Kingston, you've got some Crucial, I think I have a SanDisk one, all recommended by the manufacturer. If you start to go away from manufacturer specs, you know, you risk losing work. And I just think that you know, my attitude to risk in media is very, very kind of protective of it. So I only use recommended media. None of these things are terrifically expensive. Format ideally on a Mac. I've not yet done it on a PC. I don't think it's as straightforward on a PC, but certainly if you do it on a Mac, then you're guaranteed to get a good solid starting point. Keep your media safe, you know, use a pouch like James has here with anti-static bags, and I'm guilty of not doing that at the minute, so I want to start doing that, because I think you don't want to risk your rushes. And anything else?
No, that's it. You just have to basically have all due care and respect for the media and for the work that you're recording. So.
And just bear in mind, it's not been designed specifically for run and gun, the rigors of a film set. So just be a little more careful with it, and I guess be careful, don't slam your media into the camera, place it and click it. You know, you look after your media and your camera, and it'll look after you for years to come.